year of films releasing both in theaters and streaming, 2021 was a bit of a better year for films. However, it's not good than last year because last year we had movies canceled left and right. But 2021 proved to be a better year this time. However, it doesn't mean that stops a few bad ones from being in there. However, we're going to be counting down for the best and the worst of what 2021 can really show. As we all know that in this list, we will be counting the movies that got a worldwide release. If it came to Disney Channel, then it counts. And of course, I'm making a couple of limits. Movies like Cinderella Man and Vivo don't count, because I'm going to try and avoid as much as criticism as I can from these movies. Anywho, which films are going to really wet me up into an emotional mess, and which films are just trying to drive me crazy? This is Me, and this is the top 5 best and worst films of 2021 and early 2022. Number 5, worst. Turning Red. I get it, it is the latest Pixar movie. It's actually pretty good for audiences who enjoy the Pixar movies. But the question is, how can a movie about a little girl turning into a giant panda whenever she gets too excited or too stressed land on the worst pile? Well, let's just say Ming Lee has somehow had to be involved in being a very obnoxious character, really making this movie pretty much bad. I get a lot of people saying that Ming is important, but they also said that she might be an antagonist. But for me, I'm not going to count her any less. Count her as a villain, apparently. I mean, yeah, I can't count her as one, so yeah. Also, that we are already closer to getting the release of Lightyear, and I'm already screaming no way and want to see Bob's Burgers instead of the Lightyear garbage. Back to that, I know Ming is very obnoxious because she pushed Manly over Ming's friends and what she likes, and overclosing the panda too much. And also, she actually, spoiler, she did turn into a giant panda herself, and the too much pressure from her mom just was way too much. Even if Turning Red does land on the worst pile of the list, I'm not going to be too harsh on this one, because, well, either if it's on the worst list, I goes to show that I have seen better movies this year. Number 4, worst. Jungle Cruise. So yeah, after Mulan, I was actually looking forward to this one, and hopefully this one does a lot better. But after the horrible disaster of Heart of the Sea, looks like these guys who know island movies didn't learn their lesson from last time. They didn't learn anything. What makes I know this movie still has something good to say about it? I mean, the voice actors for Frank and Lily are still great. But that doesn't stop the movie from starting to cause problems. The movie does nothing really much. Frank is a really bad liar, and he just does too much in this film, and it carries too much action. Lily takes too much risk, and this is probably the same plot from Dolittle, just make it 10 times worse. And the antagonist is also a parody of Neville from iCarly, except to give him a British accent, he's from the war. And to top it all off, we have bees in here. Really? Do we need to have bees in here? That's just enough to make me want to stop watching the movie altogether. Look, I tried to sit through the movie, I tried to watch it, but when the bees came, I just had enough. Apparently, let's just hope we get another good Disney live action instead of this garbage, because, well, after this one, I'm never going to trust sea movies ever again. Oh, and lesson learned, You can have bees in Animal Crossing, but you can't have bees in a live-action movie. Number 3, worse, Ghostbusters Afterlife. Okay, so this is pretty much the part where things start to go absolutely downhill. This is when everything starts to fall apart, literally. And I was actually not happy that this one somehow got to theaters somehow. I hope this was just going to be direct to stream or canceled and never come to theaters. But if this movie was announced to come in November, I was not happy about it. Because the last Ghostbusters was already bad enough from 2016. Except you make this one a lot worse by removing all the Ghostbuster kids and just adding a new kid to be the new Ghostbuster. And basically that's just about it. And nothing actually happens from the movie except just letting this one be bad in the last one. After this point, I just hope this will be the end of the Ghostbusters franchise because, well, I think after this one came to streaming, well, to theater somehow, I'm just done with the franchise and hope they don't make another movie or TV series. Because after the Ghostbusters film was actually bad, I think I need to get a good dose of screaming in. Number 2. Space Jam: A New Legacy. After I saw the trailer, I thought this movie was going to be, I was expecting great things from it. But after December, I saw the movie. It was a basketball game for disaster. I know a lot of people are saying that this movie is actually that bad. Let me at least explain some of the good stuff that actually happened. The Space Jam characters are still enjoyable, and well, Jonah James is fine, and it still has some nice visuals from the other Warrior Brothers stuff. But that doesn't stop this one from causing problems. The major issue is got to be the story because it takes forever to get the entire Looney Tunes cast together, and the argument between LeBron James and Bugs Bunny is just ridiculous. The other problem is, no, it's not LeBron James, it's the antagonist. I don't even know his name, but it's a pretty long name anyway. But he's just very obnoxious. Every time he comes on screen, I'm just like aggravated. I think he got way too much screen time. And he's also a cheater as well. But I'm so glad he got turned into a basketball card just so this movie can end and I can never watch it again. Even though I actually bought the movie instead of renting it. Mark my words, I'm never going to watch this movie again. After this point of the Space Jam being bad, I just need to get some screaming done and maybe watch the new Super Pets and erase that other movie from my brain. Oh yeah, and I did see the new latest Super Pets trailer, and it looks great. And the number 1 worst movie of 2021 is Luca and the Martian. Now, before I start talking about these ones, a lot of people are going to say in the comments, like half you guys are going to criticize me on the Martian and the other half are going to tell me that Luca is great. Yeah, I get it, but it's just this one just causes problems pretty much. The story just does nothing. It's just basically boring and bland. But the other problem is the antagonist, Cole. And I gotta say, it's got to be the worst antagonist for a Pixar movie. And after this point, well, he was pretty bad, but Duncan was also bad in Monsters at Work, which I actually didn't enjoy him to begin with. But after the 4th episode with him, I basically had enough of him. And if they do another season of Monsters at Work, just please don't tell me Duncan's gonna be in it. But back on, and also the only bully antagonist I will watch now is Jackson Storm of Cars 3, because at least he picks on Lightning McQueen a lot, talks trash about him. I guess he's the only bully antagonist I will enjoy because he just does some of the memorable quotes, just saying. But Luca just definitely is just Cole has got to be the worst. He tripped Amigo and and also it hurt the movie really badly. And it never had a chance to redeem itself anyway. The Martian, on the other hand, is absolutely terrible. I mean, it's not as terrible as Castaway because I really hated that movie, by the way. But anywho, The Martian is just about a guy getting stranded on Mars all by himself, and what does he do? Absolutely nothing. It's sad to see these ones on the worst list, but every time I have to go back in and watch The Martian, I'm like, can I be done with this movie now? Because I want to get off the train wreck, stop watching the movie, and never watch it again after I get it out of my brain or my system. And for those reasons why, that is why Luca and The Martian are the worst films of what I consider the worst films of 2021. Now, before we go and take a look on the bright side of 2021, let me calm down and get to talk about the honorable mentions. There have been plenty of ups and downs throughout this year, mostly the films that are good and the ones that are terrible. Anywho, there are still plenty of ones that are, well, okay. I mean, they are mostly average of being mostly decent and mostly mediocre. But it doesn't, probably mostly will forget about these films once I move on to the more better list. But it isn't, we should still mention these, so they still have a moment of recommendations and at least make some decency this year. They may not be some of the best films this year, but they're a lot better than the ones on the worst. In no specific order, they are Hotel Transylvania, more weaker than the other Hotel Transylvania films, and plus they never explain what happened to Van Helsing, but it's still a satisfying conclusion to the franchise. The Addams Family too, more weaker than the first one, but they still at least tried on the story and the characters are still likable. However, there are still some pretty bad moments thrown in here and a few annoying characters, but they still balance it off nicely with some solid voice acting. So they tried the best they could on this one, at least try to have some fun with this. Freaky Friday. Like the daughter and the mother in their mismatched bodies, this movie can be terrible because the boyfriend can be very obnoxious. However, they're able to balance things out nicely with strong voice acting and a balance of good kid shenanigan moments and heartwarming moments. Our story. It may be our story. It may, Randy's bullying can be a bit obnoxious. Plus, it's not the greatest movie based off a book, but it's not as good as The Fault in the Stars, but it's a little better than The Hard to See because that one was mostly mediocre and probably forgettable. 5 Feet Apart. This would have been a great movie if Nurse Bar wasn't this obnoxious. Encanto! Not as good as Playable in the SpongeBob musical, but way better than their last culture movies like Luca and Raya and the Last Dragon. And also, plus, way better than the Loud House movie. And if no one saw that movie, please don't. Also, I think We Don't Talk About Bruno is probably one of the catchy. It's probably like the most biggest earworm right about now. I think it is to me. Zombies 2. It may hurt itself, have its broken relationship moments like Descendants 3, actually hurting itself. But at least it didn't hurt itself too much like Luca and still had a chance to redeem itself. Plus, the werewolf still had a solid performance here and brought up some great music numbers. So this movie was actually saved from the worst list. And finally, Nick All-Star Brawl. And yes, I am counting this as an honorable mention. Not as good as the online games. Plus, Aang and Korra are kind of unnecessary, but they're still making improvements to the game, and the characters are still lovable and enjoyable to play, and they still try to be themselves. So at least they're trying. So you guys would probably be asking me what would happen if I extended both the best and the worst list to fit all of the honorable mentions. Well, I'm actually not going to be doing the extension because I want to keep the honorable mentions where they are. But if I did make the extension, then the worst in this case would include Freaky Friday and Encanto and and 5 Feet Apart. Well, the best would include Hotel Transylvania 4, Transylvania, Nick All-Star Brawl Zombies 2, and Nick All-Star Zombies 2, and The Addams Family 2. Well, our story falls in the middle of it all as the honorable mention. Like again, they aren't some of the more best films, but they did way better than the ones on the worst. At least these ones may not be so great due to their issues and flaws, but they are still decent and still try mostly. These ones may be filled with issues, but these ones still leave me satisfied and leave me pretty satisfied. These go down to all honorable mentions for trying something. Anywho, let's get to the more best lists now. Number 5, best. The Boss Baby, Family Business. Now this is more better than watching Luca. Apparently I don't dislike Luca because of Pixar. I dislike Luca because of a Cole apparently, but I guess I talked enough about him. Boss Baby Family Business is, well, mostly mediocre with a bit of salt. I mean, it's better, but it's not one of the best films. But I still admit that I still have a soft side for another Boss Baby, and I'm actually glad they actually released this in July instead of September, so I can actually see this in summer and not wait until like September to watch this. Plus, I was already grown to the fact of Luca, so yeah, this should make up for it. And plus, they already had another DreamWorks movie being the Spirit Away sequel, but I think I don't want to get too far into that. I mean, sure, it may be a Christmas story, but as long as it is a good sequel to, well, the 2017 Boss Baby, which I have to admit, it was pretty good, but it was pretty good. But the second one felt like a bit empty and didn't feel quite as good as the first one. Because, well, most of the story was confusing and we had a bunch of bullies. And now this year is just full of bullies and about a couple of movies, and I'm not a fan of that. But I still like the creativity, and I think there were a few complaints that a couple of people don't like the new Boss Baby. I have to admit, I kind of have a soft spot. I kind of have a soft spot for her. I kind of like her. I really like her pigtails. I think she's pretty cute. And yeah, there are some moments where I can definitely be some of the most heart-tending, the most sweet, some of the most good heart moments of the film, just making me just want to go, just want to be released, it's just so sweet. But heartwarming moments, it's just so sweet. But it's not one of the best sequels to Boss Baby. I couldn't think they couldn't get up to the premise of the first one, but it's better than Luca, by the way. Moving on. Number 4, best. Sing 2. Now, actually, I've been quite a fan of musicals, and especially when I'm a fan of the musical movies, and especially if they are sequels to Elimination movies, then I'll definitely go out and see it. There's just one catch with musical movies. I'm going to at least leave the movie without at least one or more of the songs from the soundtrack will be wedged in my head, and I'll probably be singing them after I see the movie because, well, they're earworms, and most of the songs this year from movies, well, they tend to be catchy and get stuck in there real well. But I have to admit, it's a good sequel to Sing 2. Sure, there are some things I could have been better this time, could have been better. Plus, there were a couple of obnoxious characters, and there were actually not one, but 2 bullies I had to worry about. Not me. It's just I'm not a fan of the bullies. Pardon me about that. I'm just not a fan of the bullies this year. But I still like that they still gave us a pretty good, solid final act in the film. And I really like some of the, well, there's going to be some great quotes to remember from this film, and I think the voice acting is still solid. The songs are great too, especially the ones in the finale. But I just can't get this could have been me song out of my head. How or were they able to make it this catchy? I don't know. I'm probably going to be humming that song after I saw this movie. Pretty good sequel to the musical. It's better than the Loud House movie because I really didn't like the Loud House movie, and better than their confusing monkey movie Vivo, which I actually don't want to mention this one in the list, but it's just so confusing. Anywho, moving on. Number 3, best. Rio. What Rio? I just could not include Rio on this list. I just had to include this one. But I'm going to be pretty quick about it because I don't have too much to say about it. But I'll be real quick. Sure, this is one of the movies that was not released in 2021, but I just had a feeling I had to include this one on the list. It's definitely a great movie. The songs are great, and everything about the visuals and scenery are just so colorful, and it's full of creativity. I was actually off the edge of my seat on this film. I was having so much fun playing Angry Birds Rio for some reason. Oh man, this movie is good. I have to admit there are, a few weak points because the film is a bit slow, but it doesn't hold back the fun that this film still enjoys. But I'm also going to include Hoodington 2 on this spot too because, Little Red Riding Hood needs to get a mention in here. I mean, it's not what I was expecting with this film, but it was still pretty great nonetheless. And it's a good thing I didn't go into spoilers for this movie. Kept this movie spoiler free because I tend to look at spoilers a lot. So yeah, I left a couple surprises as Hansel and Gretel being the antagonists. What? That was kind of unexpected because, I was not expecting that. But most of the action scenes are great, and I think they still have some great songs, but it still struggles on the top. But even if I didn't see glad I didn't look at the spoilers ahead of time because, it left a few surprises into the film. And I think the voice acting was still great. But I keep thinking Gretel sounds like he kind of looks like Moriarty. Really, he does look like him. I think he kind of looks like him. It's kind of just me. Number 2, best. Mitchells versus the Machines. I know, I'm hearing the Mitchells fans back there. Mitchells fans back here. I knew the fans of Mitchells, the audience in the comments, are probably just been anxiously waiting for Mitchells versus the Machines because, a lot of them were fans of this movie, and this movie was very popular on Netflix. And usually I don't really agree with most movies, but for this one, I actually agree with this. One thing I could have done differently is like Sponge on the Run. I wish I saw this on the big screen instead of at home. But it's just my usual one thing I had against the movie. But it's still great. Sure, it can get sloppy and slow at times, but it's one of Sunny's best movies. And I have to agree. I mean, Sunny has done some really good movies, even if, not everyone has agreed. I really like the Emoji Movie, and I like the sequel to the Angry Birds because, I'm a fan of Angry Birds, so why not? But this has got to be one of their top-notch films. I definitely have to agree on that. I like the anime. The animation is great, and I like the voice acting very much, apparently. I just think there's so much creativity and nice stuff I can say about the film. Actually, to top it off, it still had a great antagonist, even though it's a smartphone. And I still find the antagonist enjoyable, pal. Even though she's a smartphone, I really enjoy the antagonist really much. Oh yeah, I like a lot of people probably going to have a lot of laugh with this. I kind of had some laughs with this one. Couldn't stop laughing at this one for no apparent reason. The jokes were funny, why not? And well, also in the electronics were falling down the stairs. It reminded me of Camp Coral when Sponge on the Run, where young SpongeBob was falling down the stairs and splashed into a puddle, apparently. But it's still a great movie, and well, it may not be the top movie, but I'm glad that Mitchell's vs. Machines fans have waited very patiently for this one movie to come up on the list. And I enjoy that. And I also wanted to make a quick mention to Bad Guys. Before we get to number one, I do want to mention the Bad Guys. Bad Guys. This is actually the most recent movie I saw. So I decided it should get a mention in this list, the best list. It's sure it's not one of the exciting films like I had with Ralph Breaks the Internet, but it was still a good movie. In fact, I actually like Webbs. It's my favorite character because, well, she's cool and she's, well, adorable. And I can find anybody with gaps in their teeth wicked adorable. Still a good movie, great movie. And, well, I'm never going to get those songs out of my head. Anywho, let's take a look at this year's number one best movie of 2021, and which that is Ron's Gone Wrong. I just could not think of, usually the last two times, it was a really, really hard decision deciding who should really take the top best spot in 2019. It was a pretty tough battle between Flywheel and Frozen 2. Yeah, both of them are near perfection, so it was a bit hard to choose which one would wound up on top. In 2020, well, there were a lot of good choices to choose from, so it made a difficult decision of picking number one. But this time, I didn't have a trouble time picking number one. It's just, this is the film that definitely stood out to me the most. And it's actually kind of funny that I finished the worst list with a friendship story, and I'm actually doing the same for the best list. And to be honest, this is actually by a newcomer studio called Locksmith Films, which is basically a newcomer, and this is actually their very first film, which I can understand that there's a lot of pressure on a newcomer, especially a newcomer making new films, and that might put a lot of pressure on them, a lot of pressure on their backs. But this is another one of the movies where I personally get against the bullies again. Sorry, my bad. It's just I'm just not a fan of them this year. But I also did not know that I didn't know from the insider or any source that this was actually going to be a movie. So this was kind of a surprise, but that's in a good way. Usually, the best stuff which comes in within the past 4 years, the movies I pick are usually, well, quality over popularity, even if I choose some of the most worst films, especially since the Emoji Movie got universally hated. I actually didn't mind this one. Ron's Gone Wrong, it just feels like half of the Emoji Movie and the other half, basically a parody about that kid who had a terrible day. Yeah, I feel like Barney was having the same bad day as the other kid. But I think what made this movie stood out the most is it definitely wanted to play on the emotions a lot. And there was a lot of times to smile, and I almost cried when I saw this movie. Basically, I almost cried. But I also like the relationship between Ron and Barney, which is a big, strong relationship between the two. But most of all, same too. And that's what also makes Fault in the Stars great too. It definitely plays great with the emotions, but having some drama thrown into it. And the strong relationship between Augustus and Hazel is just strong. It's strong as Ron and Barney's relationship. But I do have a bit of a few pickers against this movie, a few flaws, but unknowingly, they didn't take away the fun this movie still enjoyed. I really like this one, especially since it's from a newcomer. And this is how a best friend story should apparently go in my way, though what I say, the right way. But the last two movies, Sponge on the Run, their flaws, the jokes didn't work because, I didn't get most of them or they just weren't funny. which I was kind of disappointed that Sponge on the Run didn't have enough laughs, and it's a movie on SpongeBob. And I wish there was more laughs because the show has stuff to do actually funny. But since Ron is voiced by a comedian, I guess the jokes work this time because, well, I found most of the jokes pretty funny, especially when Ron keeps calling Barney Abigail. I think it was another name, but I guess I like to say Abigail because it rolls off the tongue better. Ron's Gone Wrong is strong but also emotional, and that's what I call this year's best movie of 2021. Most of the movies haven't been great this year, but it's still nice to stand out with a few the ones that were good. Basically, there are not the best ones out there, but there's still some pretty good ones nonetheless. And I'm looking forward to what 2022 has in store, which 2022 is the year we're finally going to get Rise of Gru, which I've been actually waiting 2 whole years to watch, and I'm finally excited they finally are releasing it. So I hope I have a good time with that. Oh, and one more thing. Will you please stop advertising? Please stop doing advertisements for Lightyear. It's getting out of control. Will you please stop with the advertisements?